from the University of KwaZulu-Natal and has obtained certificates for insolvency litigation and practice from the University of Pretoria, a certificate in foundational international insolvency from the INSOL Institute, and a certificate for women in leadership from the University of Stellenbosch. She is also a member and provincial coordinator of the South African chapter of the International Association of Women Judges. She's also a member of the Judicial Officers Association of South Africa and a member of Marketing and Transformation Subcommittee of the Criminological and Victimological Society of South Africa. She's an editorial committee member of the South African Judicial Education Institute. Ladies and gentlemen, I hand you over to Ms. Chetna Singh, who will now take over the program.
Namaste. Thank you to Prashinji for that lovely welcome, all protocol observed. It is a great honor to be able to start the Back to the Vedas series for 2023. And I hope that the remainder of the Back to the Vedas chapters for 2023 are equally successful. Participants, please excuse me. I am having a bit of trouble with my internet connectivity. So if I do cut off, don't run away. I will be back. All right. Okay. So I will need to share my screen so that you can see the slideshow that I have presented for you. And in this slideshow, I am hoping to demonstrate to you, firstly, what the Vedas, what the Vedic values are, according to what I could ascertain. And then I'm going to take you through what the definition of youth is. And in terms of that definition, where are we in the context of the South African youth and the values that are being adopted by the youth, or the lack of values for that matter. So if you have any questions, I'm going to ask that you put them in the chat box for now. And as soon as we can, we'll get to them, or you can raise your hands if it's a burning issue. So without further ado, let's kick off. All right. So by way of introduction, the Upanishads are the primordial source of all dharma, all righteousness. They are what we refer to as the operational manual of human rights and duties, and the protection of dignity. And this operational manual is essential for securing peace and happiness, so that we can create conditions where every human being can develop his personality to the fullest extent. So, for example, one need only look at the Rig Veda, where it says all humans are born equal. And we find this principle of equality reverberating throughout not only our South African constitution in terms of the Bill of Rights, but also in terms of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. In terms of that declaration, under Article 7, it says all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and in rights. And they are endowed with reason and conscience, and they should act towards one another in the spirit of brotherhood. So all are equal before the law, and they're entitled without discrimination to equal protection of the law. Even if one looks at corporate social responsibility, the origins of corporate social responsibility can be traced back to Vedic literature, such as, for example, the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, and the Puranas. This development of self-consciousness in leadership ensures transparency. It ensures good conduct, and it assures or ensures good governance in achieving corporate social responsibility. So one can get a sense of just how wide the literature of the Vedas permeates throughout the fabric of everyday life and everyday values and that people are waking up to and going to bed at night. So when we talk about this operational manual, this dharma, we also refer to it as morality or moral education. And interestingly, morality is derived from the Latin word mores, which means manners or morals. And essentially, dharma or righteousness or morals, if you must, is an accepted code of human conduct in society. So morality entails, or dharma entails, having laws that will regulate the dealings of men who can choose to abide by these laws because they know that it is good sense to do so. So being moral, being morally conscious, adopting a path of dharma and righteousness means adopting standards or principles. And you see, I have put up some of these principles on the slideshow here. Principles such as equality, principles such as truth, or what we call satya, principles such as fairness, principles such as worthiness, faith. Everything that you see here, we can go much deeper into. And of course, the Vedas do indeed describe these standards or principles as ahimsa, non-violence, as shanti, peace, as prem, love, and of course as satya, truth. So these standards or principles are a moral compass in life, and they guide one's actions and conduct in society. So moral education or education in dharma is a program of study, actually, and it teaches one about behaving in accordance with what is good and rejecting what is bad. It's a holistic approach to stimulate character building and moral development. So as a basis for Vedic values in literature, one must now consider where we are as a society in terms of these values that I have enumerated above. With civilization came a lot of changes, both positive and negative. One negative change that came with the dawn of a new era was this moral decadence, this laxity. Society has, throughout the ages, witnessed a fall in moral standards and an increased interest in pleasure and enjoyment. You'll see, here's my arrow pointing to it. You will see the luxury cars that people strive to own. You'll see the alcohol consumption. And of course, here you can see that there's a driver who's sitting behind the wheel. So here we have this moral laxity because of this increased pleasure and enjoyment, as opposed to more serious things. So moral discipline has resulted in an indiscipline at all levels in the society. And it can be seen in a lack of dignity, in a lack of general respect. I think what comes to mind must be, for those who watched the Sona address last week, the storming of the platform by the EFF members in total disrespect to the office of the president and the respect that the function ought to, or the decorum rather, that the function ought to have been seen with. We see a general intolerance amongst people. We see a lack of cooperation. And this cannot be more poignantly seen since the dawn of the constitutional era, wherein we are witnessing a breakdown of social relationships amongst races, amongst genders, and just generally people who are primarily self-centered and self-absorbed. And here I've said it again, there's no hard work anymore due to this lack of cooperation and due to this intolerance. As a presiding officer working in a courtroom, I tend to work with a number of role players from the South African Police Services to the Department of Health, Education, Social Development. And one can see that there is no discipline left in any of these areas. There is simply a lack of disregard for the time of an individual, for the time at which a court starts, for example, for proper investigations of matters. Police are more often than not taking statements the size of my thumbnail so that they can return to their cell phones, so that they can be on social media. And it's not just the police, it's by and large, we're seeing this happening all over. So what we're seeing is a lackadaisical attitude to work. We're seeing a readiness to cheat and to embezzle. And we're seeing the monster of corruption. And here in South Africa, one need not have to explain this principle of corruption. It is a permeating feature of everyday life. We see it amongst the political personnel. We see it in business. It's just everywhere. In fact, someone said to me the other day, it's as if we are swimming upstream. I couldn't agree more. So values that are predominantly held and pursued today, as opposed to what we have spoken about earlier. And just to refresh you, we spoke about love, we spoke about peace, we spoke about non-violence. But what is now coming to the forefront is a value like dishonesty. It's a value like profit-orientated relationships. Here you go, the readiness to cheat and to embezzle. All right. There's an abuse of human dignity and an abuse of life, as it were. There is a bid to acquire wealth and corruption driven by this get-rich-quick scheme. So public goods and resources are audaciously stolen by individuals. Most of whom are in leadership positions, mind you. And this is in a bid, like I said, to acquire wealth for themselves and to secure the future of their families. And they care less about the pain and the burdens to be borne by other members of society as a consequence of their actions. So today, sad as it is, and I can say this because I work in a courtroom where I see this, day in and day out. Today, people take pride in telling lies, in engaging in ungodly practices, and the embellishment of various criminal acts. Integrity is lacking in the interactions of men with one another. And there's a flagrant abuse of the laws and the human rights, as the order of the day. So this is where we are as a country. And as I am repeating to you the values that are currently permeating, there is undoubtedly in your mind a sense of association. You can relate to this. You've seen it somewhere. You've seen it in the newspapers, or you've seen it in your own working environment, whatever. But you cannot but say that this is not where we are at, not only on a global perspective, but certainly here in South Africa. And the focus of this discussion today is predominantly focusing on South Africa, albeit with a somewhat global perspective, as and when the need arises. So by means of demonstrating the principles or the Vedic values that I have indicated, together with the other end of the spectrum, and what is now very much in fashion, I'm going to move then to consider what are youth, because we are now talking about whether the youth are adopting the values of Vedic literature. you will see that the Oxford Advanced Learners Dictionary defines youth, and I quote, the time of life when a person is young, especially the time before the child becomes an adult, end quote. So youth analysts are increasingly speaking of a new phase in the life course between adolescence and adulthood. And they refer to it as an elongated phase of semi-autonomy. And it's variously called post-adolescence, youth, or emerging adulthood, as it were. So during this time, and you can see from the picture, we've got what looks like a disco going on. We've got hands up in the air. We can see that there's a carefree approach. So young people are relatively free from adult responsibilities during this time of their lives. They're able to explore diverse career and life options. There is evidence that these emerging adults in their 20s feel neither like adults nor like adolescents. Instead, they consider themselves in some ways like it. And this is an interesting dichotomy because we've spoken about previously what the kind of values are that are permeating the fabric of South African life these days. So if one considers that these are adults engaging in relationships, in conduct, in behavior of this nature, one must now bring this down or boil this down to the essence of the family unit. And we will talk about this later on. And look at, if we say that the youth are neither children nor adults, and we have adults in the family unit behaving in this fashion, we now need to consider what is the position of the youth within this kind of setup, and generally for that matter. Okay, so here we are. What is the status of youth in the community? Sorry, in the Republic, my apologies. So this is taken from Stats SA, and you will see that the youth is defined between the ages of 15 and 34. And this age grouping is not just a South African grouping. It is dictated worldwide. Other countries use this grouping as well, defining youth. So it's quite a large spectrum of ages when one considers the youngest age is 15 and the oldest age is 34. So the population in South Africa, as you can see, there are 20.4 million youth in the country. That works out to 63.3% of the country. Out of that, we've got between the 15 to 24 year age demarcation, we've got 58% of those youth are unemployed. You will see that it's marked here in brown. And then if we go further, you'll see that between 25 and 34 years of age, we've got just over a third of our youth unemployed. Now, this is an important factor because unemployment is obviously one of the biggest crises that the country faces for a lot of reasons. But youth unemployment is far more drastic, particularly because the youth of today tend to value education far more than they did previously. And certainly the gateway for girls to enjoy the benefits of education and even tertiary education have opened up tenfold. So when one places that into the factual matrix, one can see that here is a storm starting to brew. All right, so there is one comment that I want to make regarding the youth, the unemployment, the values that we're currently seeing in the Republic of South Africa. And that is that only 41% of maths and only 36% of science pupils had acquired basic subject matter knowledge in grade 9. And that's quite scary. That really is, because it also tells us that the social progress is diminishing at the back of poor educational outcomes. And like I've just shown you, the surging unemployment rates. And then, of course, we're going to look at it. We've got the excessive drug and alcohol abuse, and we've got high violent crime. And this is possibly why we saw headlines on the newspapers early or late in December relating to the matric exam cheating scandal, where matriculants were joining WhatsApp groups. I think one of the groups was called Road to Varsity. I kid you not, where teachers were willingly and freely dishing out answers to questions of the matric papers. And that tells you not only that the youth are desperate to secure places at varsity, or even just to pass for that matter, but it also again shows you the kind of reach and the depth that these, and I'm going to call them youth because we've seen that's what they are in terms of the grouping. We've seen the reach and the depth to which these youth are prepared to go to. They're prepared to lie, they are prepared to cheat, and it comes from somewhere. It has to come from somewhere. So here you'll see I've got a picture, and you can obviously see it's a marriage certificate, and there's a pair of scissors, and it's cutting right through the marriage certificate, and no guesses as to what's happening here. We can see that there is a disruption of the family unit. We can see that once the family unit has been broken apart by the separation of the two usually primary breadwinners, but obviously by the mom and the dad, then this is a breeding ground, or becomes a breeding ground, for the spiraling of values that may have once been a part of the family, but are now no longer a part of the family, or on the other end, the family values that were within this contained family setup, and that have now, as a result of the disruption of the family setup, been given wings. So whatever one observed in the family unit, now that it's been disrupted, and people go their own way, we've got now an additional set of wings, so these values can fly out and permeate the rest of the community, if you can understand what I'm saying. And so if you have grown up in an abusive home, and we know that the statistics regarding gender-based violence are not good. We know that it occurs not only in the poor communities, but that it occurs even in the wealthy communities, and for reasons such as status, the women choose not to do anything about it because it will affect their status in some way. And so we see this perpetuation, perpetuation. We see this being perpetuated generation in and generation out. So we see, and I will talk about this again at a later stage, but we see the kind of violence, and we see the kind of the values that have toxified within this family unit, being spread out in the community. And you'll see from the stats when I show you just now. So in case you think I'm talking out the top of my head, here are the statistics. And this was done in 2016 when I, gave a maintenance presentation to the Department of Women in conjunction with the United Nations. And you'll see here from the statistics, oops, sorry, if I can just go back. Sorry. According to the statistics, 25,326 divorce orders were granted in 2016. That's a lot. That's a lot. And if you see what is even worse here, is that 55%, just over half, involved children under the age of 18 years. Okay, we can call them youth now, between 15 and 18, obviously. But this is a drastically high figure. By anyone's calculations, because it tells you what I've been saying, that this disruption of the family unit is what is contributing to the decline of values that the youth are adopting, are watching, are then taking out into the world with them. And there are studies. So, for example, a
Okay,
male
Babu.
child who tends to watch his mother being beaten up every night, um, and it's not just beating up, it can get worse. They can pluck you up and throw you into a toilet, and then throw you into a bathtub rather, and then proceed to bring a pair of pliers so they can take your teeth out. They can try and force your nails open. It's disgusting. There's no other way to say it. But this is what we read in domestic violence applications every day, from time to time. So you know that this is what is happening in the home. And you know that there are children in the home, and these children are watching this. So we know that this disruption of the family unit is sending out the message that it's okay to be violent. And it's not okay to be violent. We know that it's not okay to be violent. So this next slide is the statistics now from the annual implementation of the Child Justice Act. And this is the annual report for 2021-2022 for South Africa. And what I've done is I've extracted from it the top 10 crimes allegedly committed by children. Well, the Act calls them children, but you'll see obviously from here, 15 to 17, we've got the youth, and between 10 and 14, they are still, in terms of the law, considered a child. And you'll see the top charge against children or youth between 15 and 17 was assault with the intent to cause grievous bodily harm. So that is assault, obviously with a severe degree of violence, and that's scary. I note with concern that the top charge against children between 10 and 14 is rape. Have a look at these figures here. 13-year-old, 123, 14 years old, 212, and there you go, you see it increasing as the ages increase as well. So this is also an indication that the interventions that have focused on the prevention of sexual and gender-based violence need to start before school-going age. And this is why I take you back to the disruption of the family unit, for where you saw here that 55% of these children are under 18, and by and large, many of them are not even school going. So that is something to think about. The definitions of 8 of the top 10 charges. So we're leaving out possession or the use of drugs, and we're leaving out theft. These 8 all involve the element of violence. And then it's clear to see, obviously, that the commissioning of these crimes start at a very young age. So violence prevention interventions, therefore, also need to start at a very young age. There's been a study called the Birth to 20 Plus study, obviously from birth to 20 years or more, and it actually provides harrowing insights into excuse me, the violence in the lives of children over a course of more than 20 years. This study found that 99% of children in this birth cohort had experienced or had witnessed some form of violence, and that nearly half of all preschool aged children, excuse me, were reported to have experienced physical punishment by parents or caregivers. And that physical punishment is often used as a method of discipline. We have become very strong about it in the courts. The moment that a child is reported in terms of the children's court, there is normally an instruction given to open a criminal matter against the parent, or vice versa. The moment it comes through the criminal court, we normally refer it directly to the children's court, and we generally ask for removal of that child from the parent because of the abuse suffered by the parent towards the child. So studies from South Africa and elsewhere show that male children who experience violent discipline or other maltreatment during childhood are more likely to be violent towards other children, as well as their own children, as well as their partners in adulthood. So here we have the disintegration of the family unit. And here you can see this is what happens. This is exactly what happens. This is what these children become. This is what they do. Because they have experienced it, they've witnessed it, and it seems like normal behavior, because these are the values that are being passed down through the family unit or through the community in general. So the National Strategic Plan on Gender-Based Violence and Femicide recognizes children who experience violence within families and institutions as the main targets for intervention, which is why today and the discussion on values and value systems is so important to bring into the forum and to reconsider what type of values are needed to replace the values of ahimsa. Right, so here we have the second table that I wanted to share with you. And again, this also comes from the annual report on the implementation of the Child Justice Act. These are, like I say, the latest statistics. It's from the 2021-2022 report. And here you have, during this reporting period, you've got 2 12-year-old children and 5 13-year-old children who are convicted of, and 3 13-year-old children who are convicted of rape. 12 years old, all right? And so as we go higher, you'll see that there is what we call the dangerous period, where teenagers like to experiment. It's usually around this period between the 15 and the 16-year-olds. It's often where we see the most amount of false rape cases coming through the court, largely because she has engaged in sexual intercourse, and mommy or daddy has found out about it, and then suddenly, she's tried to protect herself and claims rape. So normally we are very concerned about this age group, but this is invariably child-on-child rape, which goes to show that children are watching this, or they are aware that this has it's been done to them, obviously, and they're just repeating that kind of behavior. So the majority of these convictions, as we can see, is for rape, and convictions of housebreaking with intent to steal and theft. What is interesting here is the 50 children, sorry, you can't see the total, but there it is. 50 children between 12 and 17 have been convicted of murder, the most brutal form of violence, because it naturally extinguishes life. And when one considers the elements of violence in these charges, as well as the total for murder, one can easily see that youth are not adopting the values of Vedic culture. There is clearly no regard for ahimsa. There's clearly no regard for any form of peace or tolerance or love, for that matter. And while we're on that, the prevalence of youth violence in South Africa, as I've indicated to you above with the studies that I've mentioned, it requires dedicated, targeted responses. So there is another study, for example, in 2008 that was done, and it found that young people are twice as likely to have been victimized by violence or crime than adults. So we're finding a skewed table here, where youth violence obviously takes on a far greater toll on the well-being of the South African youth. Some of this has to do with the vulnerabilities that young people are obviously facing as a result of their lack of independence, their lack of maturity, their propensity to take risks, and of course their susceptibility to peer influence. So that's another thing just to consider as well. All right, let's move on. I think these statistics are enough to make anyone's skin crawl or to give you the chills. But that is a perspective of the status of youth in the country as compared to the values that they are meant to, or we hope are supposed to be adopting. So I want us now to look at the position globally. So let's move out of South Africa. Yes.
Sorry, I'm just going to disturb. It's Prasheen here. I just, as much as we would really love to go on, we're nearing our closing time, and we would like to have some questions and answers and some interaction with our audience as well.
Okay.
So I'm not sure how much more.
Allow me to finish up in 2 minutes. Will that be good?
That's perfectly fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so my time has been cut down, but I will give you my email address so we can always chat again at a later stage. This is a study done between 1994 and 1998. These are the top 5 important goals or values. And there's just one thing I want to point out to you. Have a look at finding meaning and purpose in my life. You will see that between 1976 and 1980, and again in 1998, we've got a negative value there. So clearly that value has dropped. And then have a look at having lots of money. That has increased by 10. That's a massive jump. And then to point out finding meaning and purpose in my life for females have dropped more than double males. And again, making a contribution to society obviously has increased, but so has having lots of money. We could talk about this some more, but I'm running out of time. So let's quickly move on. Okay, now I've worked with people, I've worked with youth from a lot of people of all ages. So it's given me a unique experience into learning about the different value systems about people and their respective cultures. All I want to end up by saying is that values reflect our sense of right and wrong. We learn most of our values from parents and extended families. These values reflect how we live our life and what we consider important. Social values should include justice, freedom, respect, community, and responsibility. I know that society tends to favor those that can do almost anything to attain power and money, and it celebrates corruption. But I want to just remind you that in as much as you want to observe such sad practices, you can still make a positive impact. For example, consider the late South African president, Nelson Mandela. He's celebrated as a truly remarkable man. And consider the young Pakistani youth, Malala Yousafzai, who stands out as a youth with values, because she considers to advocate for good, even in the face of persistent danger. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, but these are the resources that I used. If you want some of the resources, you're more than welcome to contact me afterwards, and I will gladly hand them over to you. All right, okay. Thank you, everyone, for listening to me. I hope I haven't bored you to bits. Thank you, Prasheen. Over to you, Aditi.
Thank you, Chetnaji. I don't know whether I should address you now as your worship or Chetnaji. It took me all the way back to the courtroom, but nevertheless, I can identify with so much of what you've said, you know, with regards to the frustration and the disbelief that comes with being in the courtroom and having to, you know, listen to what we have to listen to, and know that, you know, some of the role players actually resort to such lies or dishonesty or dishonest means to reach their means or to shift the blame sometimes. That was extremely insightful and detailed. Thank you once again. I'm going to open the floor to our audience to see if there's any questions or comments that we would like to share or to get more info from our very learned speaker this afternoon. While we're waiting, I just—
No question is a stupid question.
I'm going to ask the question. So let's just try and see if we can help out here or understand a little better. You know, I know that we all agree that our Vedas are so versatile, and its applicability to our society.
Everyone is very quiet, Prashinji.
Yes,
I don't know whether they are just flabbergasted.
I'm sure they are. It's quite a bit to take in. Let's give them a few minutes and let them recollect it. Oh, I see Aarti Ji's got her hand up.
Namaste, Prasheen. Namaste, Chetna.
Namaste.
Thank you very much, Chetna, for a wonderfully researched talk. I'm just looking at the participants list and wondering how many youth were listening to you. I can't make out how many of them are youth, but I know a lot of them are adults. What I would like to say on behalf of the Arya Samaj is that we would like you to do a workshop on the same topic, especially addressing our Purohits who need to go out there and do the field work with the youth. Right? So that's my proposition for this evening, and thank you very much. Namaste.
Namaste. Thank you very much. I would be excited to work with you and to take this out to the field. I think the more the better. We can never have enough hands in this, you know.
Not at all. I see we've got two messages on from Prabodhji, who says, thank you for the excellent talk. And from Prakash Basantji, who says, congratulations to the speaker on a well-researched presentation and professional slides. And many thanks to all. And another one from Prabodhji, who says it's an excellent idea, Aarti Ben. I see we've got Usha Chirkutji, who's got her hand up.
Yes, Namaste, Bhenjis. Thank you, Chetna. That was an excellent presentation. But what I'd like to see is how do we get the value system from the Vedas across to the youth? Because if they don't know about this, how are they going to practice it? The values of the Vedas are contained amongst a select lot of people like Hindus. So how do we spread it out? There's got to be some way through the education system that we can spread it to youth all over.
Sorry, I'm struggling to hear you.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Hello, can you hear me now?
Perhaps if we type the question out, I'm not sure if that would help a bit.
Okay, sorry about that. I did indicate I had connection issues. If that question could just be repeated, I managed to catch words to the effect that how do we convey the values to our youth? Am I correct?
Yes, you are correct. Could we not inculcate it into the education system that it reaches a wider spectrum of youth? Because we can bring it through our religious organizations to our youth, the Hindu youth. But how do we take it around through to the country, to everyone, so that it becomes part and parcel of their upbringing?
Yeah, you know, Ushaji, this is a very lofty ideal that we're talking about. And I say lofty because I'm currently working on a program right now to do a book drive for the Hendrina Child and Youth Care Center in Mpumalanga. It's one of 3 in the country, mind you. And these youth are what we call awaiting trial youth. So they're awaiting their court case, but they are behind bars like a juvenile prison. And would you believe, whilst they are awaiting trial, the Department of Education refuses to entertain any requests to educate them. So these youth or children, they sit languishing all day long. And you know, if we can get the Department of Education on board, so much the better. We've been trying to nag them for years now, ever since I've been on their provincial forum committees, and that was back in 2015, and nothing has changed. But the best option would be to take this to be the flag bearer in this for ourselves, and through that we will be able to gain momentum. That's the best option I can suggest for now. Remember also that one can only proceed.
I realize the difficulties you probably have with the Department of Education, but if you don't educate these values to youth, they're never going to know it. it will always be our children knowing it because they are part of the Vedic system, and the rest of the world not knowing anything. So you cannot then assess what the values are today, Vedic values in youth, if they don't know what the values are. So there's got to be some way that everyone needs to work towards trying to spread this around. And that is a lofty ideal, but all lofty ideals are difficult.
But achievable.
And achievable at some point. Yes.
And that was
So
the point
good
of this
luck.
discussion. There's no easy solution to this. But
Yes.
at least it can get the participants thinking about what to do, how to do it. And I think if you can take that away from it, then we're half the journey there at least.
Yes. Absolutely. I agree with you. And thank you for a good presentation.
Thank you for your question.
See, RPG's got a hand up there.
Thank you, Prasheen. I was just listening to what Ushaji had to say about us getting it out to children across the spectrum. What we are doing at the moment, Chetna, is we've got our prisons program, which is called Umuntu Omusha, right?
Good.
And what we do when we get in there as priests, we have a class together for all prisoners, whether irrespective of their color or religious backgrounds. And we do a value-based education with them. And I think this is what we need. And I know that the education department is giving you a hard time, but you were talking about children who are in prison, right? Incarcerated. So if we can start working with them as well, it's one way of us getting our teachings across to them, because we've been quite successful with the inmates at correctional services.
For sure.
At the end of the program, we get them to do assessments and things like that, and we actually give them a certificate for it.
Yeah.
So
tell me, is this part of their sentencing program where they have to undergo this as part of their correctional supervision? Albeit
not at all. Not at all.
Because that would be good. That would be good if they could do that.
But you see, it's all because of the chaplain. The chaplain wants all inmates, to have a value-based education, whether you're Christian or Hindu or Muslim. We have pastors coming in there as well. We have Maulanas coming in there as well. So, we're doing that with them, with the adults. I'm sure we can start it with children as well. And not wait for the department, because I don't think we're going to get anywhere with them.
Yes, I know that Westville Prison has a juvenile facility.
Yes.
And I'm not sure whether you do it for their juvenile facility.
Yes, we had Pandit Usha, Devi Prasad, who was there with them. And she really had all the children paying attention to her and taking part in the conversations and things like that.
That's wonderful.
So that's one way of I think that, that we could reach out to them.
Absolutely. And, you only need to make a difference to one life. For that one life to blossom and bloom and spread the message out again. Because these children, I always say to them, it's not the end of the world. You've hit rock bottom, but you can only go up from there.
That's right. Thank you, Chetna.
Thank you,
Prasheen. Thank you.
We have one more comment from one of our audience members who says it's an excellent presentation, much appreciated, as this is valuable information, and wish more youth were listening. I think
we always wish the youth are listening, but they don't.
I'd like to think we're youth enough too, so hopefully we've learned a bit too. I think essentially what we've taken from this entire talk is that we want the youth of today, who will be our future leaders, to develop a morally sound manner of conducting themselves and a responsible way of dealing with situations that they may be faced with. So with that, we would like to thank our dynamic and learned speaker, Ms. Chetna Singh, for your time and your invaluable message. Thank you.
Sorry,
Thank you.
Prasheen, I think Pandit Kiran's got his hand up.
Oh, sorry,
Sorry.
Panditji.
Namaste, Namaste Chetna.
Namaste.
Sorry, I just came in at the last moment. I was just listening to the conversations, but we centered around the correctional services. I was just thinking that with the stats that you have and the presentation that you did, maybe we could also use it to put together a package where we could, even as priests, like we go out to ABH and various other centers, maybe we could actually link up with governing bodies at schools and say to them, can you give us an opportunity to chat with your grade 11s and grade 12s, and or even the lower grades, just a half an hour in terms of their time, they could slot us in so that we could then share some of the values that you are talking about, and even presenting those statistics, which are very awesome and fearful. Because when you look at the youngsters that walk out of school in the afternoons, they are just pairing off, linking hands and necking around the trees and whatever. I'm sorry to say it like this, but we see it every day. And this is where we need to also focus on the schools in terms of the discipline and introducing some sort of value-based lifestyle. And also introducing them to this whole program of HIV and AIDS also. Just a suggestion, maybe you could help us put together something so that we can direct it to the youth also. Thank you.
Pandit Kiranji, well, what you said there is has a lot of food for thought, and I've just been thinking about all the different types of organizations. So perhaps you and I must chat a little bit later. There are NGOs in place. I used to be a preliminary inquiry magistrate as well, which means I see them before they enter the formal criminal justice system, and we try and divert them through there. So NGOs like NICRO, FAMSA, those kind of organizations would surely be interested in having your services. So that's an idea to think about.
Thank you.
Thank
I think
you.
we've got Rekha ji who's got her hand up as well. Namaste, Rekha ji.
Namaste, Prasheen. Well done, Chetna. Excellent presentation. I just want to say and echo what
Thanks, Mom.
I have said, that we need to spread the word. The way we could do it by media, the railways, the radio stations, and like the literacy drive you have, give out books in prisons, in schools, give our Vedic literature into schools, and I think that's where we could start. But having said that, it's important to be there, to be aware, to have, to talk one-on-one with these children. So that's my input. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we have one more comment from Hemant Pindaprasadji, who says, thank you for an informative talk. As a society, we need to look at the 13 and 14-year-olds, and the percentage of wrongdoers jumps 500% between the ages of 13 and 14 years. Thank you. Rekha ji, I'm not sure if you have another comment or, okay. All right, do we have any other comments or questions or queries before we close up?
I'm trying to find the right. Okay, I have a suggestion.
Yes. Yes, go ahead.
Go ahead. Perhaps we've lost her.
Okay. Prasheenji, what I've done is I've just left my email address in the chat box. So anyone who wants to chat further is more than welcome to email me. If you want the presentation, I'll gladly send it to you as well.
Lovely. I'm sure everybody would benefit from that. If I can just quickly, it's SINGHCHETS@gmail.com. That's the email address that you need to send an email to Chetna Ji for any further information or maybe a copy of this presentation for this afternoon. Please do diarize our next lecture, which will be held on the 15th of March 2023, where we will be exploring the topic on the prestige and status of women in Vedic literature, the reflections on today's society, which will be presented by Ms. Usha Lala. We look forward to interacting with you then. We will now close the session with Shantipat, and we ask that you all please do join in, and may you all have a blessed week ahead. Om Dhyo Shanti Antariksham Shanti Prithvi Shanti Rapah Shanti Roshadhayah Shanti Vanaspatayah Shanti Vishwe Devah Shanti Brahma Shanti Sarvam Shanti Shanti Eva Shanti Sama Shanti Edi Om Shanti 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 Om. Namaste everybody. Have a lovely evening.